All right, we're on. We're rolling.
I was waiting for you to say that. You always say
I
that.
always do say that. If I didn't say that, we'd sit here in silence for an hour and a half.
We would. We just wait. We
Oh,
wait
but
until you.
it'd be so much easier to edit though.
That's true.
And then
All
if
right.
anyone
Welcome.
complains about it, there was nothing on there. It was just silent. Like you just don't get our art.
It's
We tell
experimental.
them in the title it's not helpful. What were
Yeah,
It's
they
true.
expecting?
exactly right.
Speaking of, welcome to We're Not Helpful, a podcast about books, recommendations, our thoughts and opinions. I'm Eloise, and joining me as always is Brayton and Julian. Hello, my lovelies.
Hello.
Good morning.
No, it's not.
They don't know that.
That's true. It could be morning. Are you listening to us in the morning? Good morning, everyone.
I don't know. Didn't daylight savings just start?
What do
Not
they
for
do with
us.
that? Did they put the clocks forward or
Happy
back?
afternoon.
I never remember.
It
Forward.
went forward, I believe.
Okay. We don't have to do it because apparently it'll fade the curtains.
Do you know how much curtains cost these days? I don't
That
think
is.
that is something you should just snark at.
That
Mm,
was a legitimate, if people don't know, we're in Queensland and we got rid of daylight savings many, many moons ago. And I think one of the arguments about it was something to do with it would fade the curtains. I don't really understand the logic behind it. I'm just glad we don't have to put.
behind how curtains fade,
Well, no, I think it was because
or just daylight.
you had to close the curtains because the sun would be up. And I'm like, but you have the same amount of sun. Anyway, I'm not going to get into
Okay, no,
Because
please
you're
do
closing the
strangeness
continue.
curtains
of.
to go to bed at 8:30 when it's actually 7:30, so that in summer there's still daylight happening.
Oh,
So the curtains are
okay.
being closed earlier, getting extra daylight, therefore fading faster.
Right, okay. I go to bed later. There we go. There's my
Hear
little
that,
tip for
everyone
you.
And then
listening
the
in
problems
daylight
of the world
savings
are
time?
solved. Go to bed later.
Just go to bed later.
Sleep less. You'll get more things done. This is an official stance of the podcast.
I would like to say that this is not the scientific consensus. Apparently, sleep is important.
Whatever.
Yeah, I know.
You forgot
Look,
we're
if
not
I have an extra
helpful.
hour to stay awake, I have an extra hour to be anxious.
Oh,
Mm.
okay.
So, I'm accomplishing a lot
Apparently,
there.
apparently, if you do live in a place with daylight savings, the best time to go out for a night on the town is when you have to turn the clocks back because you hit like 3 a.m. and it flicks back to 2 a.m. You've got an extra hour to party.
Extra hour of drinking. Excellent.
Yep, that
Wonderful
it.
advice. We
These
we
are these are the
thoroughly endorse
tips that
binge
you
drinking.
please drink responsibly.
Yes, please do. It's really funny coming from people who do not drink. Brayton and Julian don't drink at all, and I hardly drink ever.
Yeah, I was going to say between the three of us, you drink the most.
I do, and I do not drink that much.
And I was going to say, I think in all the years I've known you, I might have seen you drink maybe 3 times,
Yeah, oh, maybe, probably.
maybe. Yeah. Then
Oh,
again,
it's
I don't
because,
watch you 24 hours a day.
oh, I thought you did. Are you always around?
You
No, we
changed your
split. We split
you,
it between the two of
Oh, yep.
us,
I
the
forgot. That's
issue
right.
is you
rotating
Yes.
roster.
changed your Wi-Fi password, so all my hidden cameras got disconnected from the network.
Yeah.
So
Okay. I
I
think we're
need your
getting into the
Wi-Fi password.
realms. We're getting into the realms of really creepy here. No one understands what's going on. They don't understand our our history. No, there's no history. Hang on, that makes it sound even sus. All right. Let's move on. Brayton, you had a question to pose
I
for us
did.
for
I
this
did.
week.
Yeah, so I've been reading this. This is a question that I is coming from this book.
Hmm.
No one listening can see it, but you guys can. And if you watch on
Ethics in the
YouTube,
real world. Haha, I spoilt it for everyone
He
now.
showed
it,
us the title page, people. He showed us the actual
see,
cover of the book.
this is how
Yeah.
you do it. I could have done this whole section like this.
You could have. You could have posed the question and then revealed the book. That's how it's done, Brayton.
Yep. No, I don't
We've just
like.
lost all of our clickbait. Thank you.
I know. Although I did share that video with you guys afterwards, and I think Eloise, you said I'm literally outraged.
Yes, I literally
I
did say
shared an
that.
example of them not showing the book until halfway through the video.
I was very
You
angry.
understand now.
I do.
So, this book is Ethics in the Real World by Peter Singer.
Mm-hmm.
It's 90 essays on things that matter. So Peter
Oh,
Singer
okay.
is an Australian philosopher, quite well known around the world, and I guess in that philosophy thing, he's big on animal rights, and a host of other things, but he's mostly, I think, known for his animal rights activism and his articles on that. He's a big proponent of veganism and ethical treatment of animals. And this book has some essays on that. I haven't got through all of them yet, but it's a nice, because it's an anthology, you can just pick it up and pick an article to read, and it's really good. But there's one question in here that I read, and it's kind of tangentially related to books. It's in an essay called, just going to find it. You can hear the pages flicking through.
I can't actually. Should I do sound effects?
I had it marked, and then it's gone.
It didn't sound like pages.
I lost my mark.
Did it
There it
nod?
is.
It
It's
sounded
from
like something else entirely.
Look, I'm not a sound effects person.
clearly. You know Michael Winslow.
No. I was trying to
That
think who's the guy from Spaceballs. I can't remember his name.
that's a deep cut. That's the no, I hopefully got his name right. The guy from Police Academy that makes all
Yeah,
the
yeah.
sounds.
Yeah, Michael
He does
Winslow.
it.
Okay,
Yes,
good.
he does a cameo in Spaceballs. Anyway.
Okay, fair enough. Oh, he does too. Okay, so
Mm.
this question is from an essay he wrote called Thinking About the Dead. And I'm going to adapt it slightly. I'm just paraphrasing some things, but here's the question. So
Mhm.
imagine a colleague of yours or a friend, whoever, doesn't matter, they get this news that unfortunately they have an illness, okay, and most likely going to be terminal. So they resign from their job and go off and do whatever they need to do. A year later, you get a phone call from them. You're like, hey, come over to my place. Got something to show you. So you head over there and they have written a book. Okay. And they're like, this is like, I've spent like potentially my last year writing this book. Okay. This is what I want to be known for. And if I pass away, I want you to find a publisher for it and get it published. Okay. So in this hypothetical, self-publishing isn't an option. It has to be traditional publishing.
Okay.
Okay. You take the manuscript, go home, and about a week later, you get a phone call that unfortunately this person has passed away. So you decide to sit down and read their manuscript. Okay, and this can be a fiction book, non-fiction book, whatever your imagination wants to. And as you get to the end, you think, yeah, the book is good and it probably would get published, but it's nothing really groundbreaking. It's nothing that's got like this big wow thing. It's not going to change the world. And you think, is it really worth putting a book out like this that may or may not sell well in an already overly saturated market? So you take the book and you just put it away in your drawer and just forget about it.
Okay.
So the question is,
Mhm.
did you do anything wrong by not publishing that book or trying to get it published?
Oh man. What a question.
In this situation, no one else knows about it.
Uh-huh.
You were under no legal obligation to do anything with it. This was just a request from your friend
Mm-hmm.
to do it. So, did you do anything wrong by not publishing the book?
Okay, I'm going to start here because immediately when you were telling this hypothetical, my brain went to you're reading this and it's like the book itself is trash. It's like maybe a Nazi manifesto. It's like awful. What do you do? And immediately my answer would have been, well, you don't. You just put it
Oh,
away and you don't
of
tell
of
anyone
course.
because
Yes.
they're dead now and what does it matter? But then you that's not what
No, it's
happened.
not.
You said that it was like it's a fine book. It might get published, but it's
Mm,
not like groundbreaking or anything. It's not going to change lives. So then you put it away. So why on earth do I now feel bad? Because the answer should be the same.
yeah.
But the fact, oh, Brayton, the
I
fact that,
I struggled with this too because and I asked my
ah,
wife the same question. her brain didn't go there. Her brain went that the book is so good that you're going to steal their work and publish it under your name.
Of
That's where
course.
her brain immediately went, which is also something to consider.
It's like,
But in this
is that
situation,
wrong?
the book is just like average. It's okay.
Okay.
So yeah, did you do anything wrong by not pursuing publication?
Yeah, I
What is your gut telling you?
For those on YouTube, you could see me grimacing and not making any more noises. It's so hard. I feel like
Julian's just kind
it's
of sitting there pensively.
he's waiting for me to finish so that he can
Mm.
give his own opinion.
Then he's just going to give a flat out just yes or no and done.
And then we'll move on.
No justifications.
I'm really struggling to think have you done something wrong by not I don't see, okay, how good a friend were they to you? Like
So if I said they were just a work acquaintance, like you were friendly with you sat at the desk next to them, you were friendly with them, but
mhm.
you didn't really hang out at dinners at Saturday night. Would that be different to if I said it was someone you'd known since primary school?
I feel it would for me personally. I feel
Mm.
like if it was just someone who, well, maybe they say, promote my book on your podcast, and then we just never did it.
Mm. Which, if we did that, it's probably just because we're all very forgetful.
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think I would feel bad, but I don't know if it's inherently wrong to have not done that. Does that make me a bad person?
No, none of this makes you a bad
Yes.
person.
Don't
Yes, it
know.
does.
You'd say
Sorry,
that.
overruled.
Overruled. Julian said it makes you a bad person. Julian, your thoughts?
My thought. Okay, I have some questions.
Yep.
Mhm.
You already answered one, so we're not necessarily that close. That's fine. Did I promise this person as their dying wish that I would do that?
Good question.
Or did they just go, hey, do me a favor and get this published? And I'm just like, huh.
If you said yes, I will, does that change the idea? Well, we can look at it. We can look at it both ways.
Yes.
If you said yes, I will do it for you, and then you read it and went, actually, like would you have done something wrong then compared to if you'd said no?
Based on my own set of standards, yes. If I've said I was going to do something for someone and I decide not to do it because I'm like, couldn't really give a fuck, that's poor form in my opinion for me. Now, I'm not going to hold anyone else to that same standard because we all have our own set of standards that we live by. So I would say yes. Now, however, if that book would sell and make money, then I'm going to steal the book and publish it as my own, even if it brings in just enough money for me to fund my own hobbies. But that's, again, something that I can live with.
I'm pretty sure there's a Stephen King story that's that exact thing happens.
If you want,
and it
I can
ended badly for that person.
Technically, he didn't sell someone else's story. It was his own inner thoughts.
Okay.
If you would like, Peter Singer in the book gives this explanation. He says, you congratulate your friend on finishing the work. She is weak and tired, but evidently satisfied just with having put it in your hands. So you have made no direct, at least as Peter Singer has written, you have made no direct promise to publish it.
I think humanizing it that way, like now that I'm picturing her, like, dying, here's my book. Now I feel worse. So I don't know.
I feel like if they've gone to their grave thinking I was going to do it, then I have to do it.
Even if no one's holding you.
If other people
but
are
that,
like,
the good thing about that question I found is it really questions, like, it's your own moral judgment, isn't it? That no one holding your feet to the fire to do it. It's up to you if you wanted to do it.
And I think that's completely separate from the philosophical question or the moral question of, is it right or wrong to have then not done it if you don't do it? It's an interesting thought experiment to pose.
Here, Eloise, since you were struggling with this, what if I change the ending?
Okay.
Instead of just putting it in like a filing cabinet drawer and forgetting about it, I
Hmm.
chucked it in the recycle bin and
Oh,
it got
that's
chucked
good. Yeah.
away.
Oh, yeah. No, no. I like that. Yeah. I think
See,
chucking it away
isn't
makes
that
it
interesting
worse.
that just like you change a certain act and suddenly your whole opinion of it has shifted?
Because you're destroying it that way. Like, I think there's
Yes.
a difference
Yes.
between just not letting something out into the world and then physically destroying it. I think that's a different thing again altogether. Because, like, maybe you pass away and then someone else comes across it and goes, "Oh, look, a book. Oh, see if I can get it published now." And maybe it, like, I don't know, maybe it happens later. But yeah, I don't like the idea of destroying it, especially someone else's work.
Mm,
Um, and coming from the point of view of someone who has dabbled a bit in doing a lot of writing, I think the idea that if I was to give something to someone and was really happy to give it to them and their reaction was to just go and then like throw it away, that would be really hurtful. So yeah. Again, I still don't think I can answer the question as to whether or not it's wrong for having not
mm.
followed through with the action, I suppose, of getting it published. I suppose, does it make it easier maybe if you hadn't read it? Like maybe if you don't read it and then just try and take it, would it change your desire to get it published perhaps if you hadn't read it and put your own opinion on what the book is?
Mm.
The thing about ethics is that no answer is ever really
No.
wrong because any branch of ethics allows you to justify your actions one way or another.
Mm.
So I don't think there's anything wrong. It's just whether or not can you live with your choice in the matter.
Mm.
Yeah. What if the real life situation, Franz Kafka, I think you know anything about his writing? He wrote
He,
A
Metamorphosis.
little bit,
yes.
yeah.
I was
Yeah.
about to say he did the one about the man turning into a cockroach, and
Yeah.
I couldn't
Yeah.
quite remember the name of
Yeah. I
the
haven't read it.
title.
Apparently it's
Yes.
really good.
Mm.
He was very self-critical his whole life, and when he was close to death, I think he asked his friend to destroy all of his work,
Oh,
and his
okay.
friend didn't
Yes.
and got it published. And
Oh,
now he's
okay.
very influential.
Yeah.
But if we reverse the situation there, did his friend do something wrong by not following through his with his wishes, even though it's now given us this amazing body of work, which some of it was destroyed, I believe, might have been by Kafka himself
Mm.
before he passed away, but a lot of it was saved. But
Yep.
then, if we're looking ethically again, did his friend do something wrong by not destroying it and getting it published?
I guess it comes down to how, like, the reasons why he was so self-critical. Was it like, mental illness that he was suffering from, perhaps, that meant that he couldn't be positive about himself and his writings? But then, I don't know, does that kind of infantilize someone if you decide for them
Mm,
that just because they're suffering doesn't mean that they aren't in charge of their desires? I mean, you could kind of say the same thing about Van Gogh, I suppose,
mm.
because he obviously suffered quite terribly from mental illness in his entire life. And didn't he destroy some of his paintings as well?
Yeah,
Now
he
he's
He
one of
painted
the,
did.
over a lot of them.
yeah,
Yeah.
he's like one of the most lauded artists of the last few hundred years,
Mm.
basically. Like
There's a very good
everything.
Doctor Who episode about it.
Oh, one of my favorite
Oh,
Doctor Who
watch
episodes.
that ending
Oh,
and not cry,
just
I dare you.
Mm.
oh no, if you watch Bill Nye's speech at the end and you're not sobbing by the end of it,
Well, I think we found the
where is
standard
your
of
heart?
if we can tell you're a good person or not is if you cry at
Yes.
that. If you don't
Yes.
cry at that, you are
Mm.
not a good. No, I shouldn't say that.
Okay. We
All right.
don't deal in absolutes.
No,
Um,
definitely not. Only a
I was
Sith
gonna
deals in
also,
That
absolutes.
oh
was an
yeah.
absolute right there, Brayden.
Are the Jedi Sith?
I don't think
Yes.
they're Sith.
Hmm.
I was going to mention, is it Harper Lee or Lee Harper? I always get it. Harper Lee?
Happily.
Who,
Happily.
yes, who wrote To Kill a Mockingbird.
Hmm.
So she obviously wrote another book. I forgot the name of it. Which was,
Go set a watchman.
yes, which was published posthumously only a few years ago,
Mm.
and a lot of people hated it because of what she did to the character of Atticus Finch. But she very clearly, before she died, said, "I do not want this published because I actually don't like what I've done, and don't publish this." And for
Was Ghost
whatever
Set a
reason,
Watchman, I might be misremembering, but was it an early draft of To Kill a Mockingbird, like an early version she'd written? Or
I
was it a
don't
sequel? I
know.
can't remember.
Yes, it was an earlier drafting that he discarded and turned into To Kill a Mockingbird, but then
Okay.
later on she expanded on what she'd written.
Okay.
Yeah. And it apparently turned Atticus quite racist. Was that
Mm.
what the
I had
problem
heard.
was?
That was the complaint. I haven't read it myself, but apparently those complaints are a little overblown. It didn't turn him into a rabid racist or anything like
Okay.
that. But the ideals that he lives by in To Kill a Mockingbird weren't as fleshed out. I think he was
Right.
very much, again, a product of his time and place
Okay.
in
And again,
Yeah.
Ghost
one
of
of
the
those
Watchmen.
things where you probably shouldn't be comparing the ideals of, the early 2020s to something that is set in the 1930s as
Yeah.
well. But like, what do you feel about how her obviously desires were for that manuscript to never see the light of day, and then the publishing company did? Then was it
Well,
just a cash
apparently
grab,
she
or
she allowed it later in life, just before she died. She about faced on it, and that's how they were able to get
okay.
it published.
Mm.
But then there was a big legal battle because they were saying she wasn't in her right mind and she was coerced into allowing it to be
Yeah.
released. And it's
Yeah. Which
it's
a lot of
it's
It's a
people
a
tricky.
had
touchy area.
said
Yeah.
Yeah.
was because, it's just trying to cash cow
Yeah.
kind of
I
thing.
think in that situation, my gut feeling goes to don't publish it because it's on the record that she
Mm.
did not want that published. Whereas in the situation I gave, there's no record except what you heard of them asking you to publish this book.
Okay.
I think for me the gut instinct is that's how it's different. It's on the record, but then that also brings into, well, is that only that because now there's accountability? There's,
Right.
I mean, there's whole university courses about this thing.
Yes. Well, okay, so you've gotten us to answer the question. I want
Yep.
you to answer the question now. What are your thoughts, considering you're the one who's been reading this book?
Yep. My gut instinct, at least my own moral standard, says yes, you did something wrong. Just morally for myself, if Julian had written a book and he unfortunately passed away and gave me this, no matter what I thought of it, I would make an attempt.
Unfortunate.
Yep. I would at least make an attempt to get it published. At least send it into a few publishers. If I read it and think this is not that good, but I'm going to try, then my own kind of moral sense is satisfied that I gave it a shot. I tried. It's the publisher's fault they don't want this book, not
Yeah.
me.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I
Now,
think if you've made the effort to actually try and get it published, but no one picks it up, that's not on you, because
No.
that's just the reality of trying to publish books
Yeah.
anyway. But if you've taken that decision away, then that's where I think the gray area comes into it.
Yeah.
I'm a very lazy man as well, Brayton. So if you tried exactly once and gave up there,
Mm.
that's fine with me. I understand that.
Yep. If I go the self-publishing route and the file fails to upload, that is a sign that this book was not meant to be.
Well, I tried.
That's
Yep.
exactly right. You tried, satisfied.
Julian,
Because I would do the
Julian,
same.
Julian, why are you not giving me the
Yes,
book to
yes,
try and
yes.
publish? Why is it just Brayton? What's so great about Brayton? You wouldn't trust me with trying to publish the book for you.
Because you won't give me my money.
That is true. You're always saying, pay me money, and then I never do. I'm
Yeah.
very sorry.
Actually, I have evidence that Eloise gave me money.
We had dinner last night.
We
You
did.
ordered pizza. I paid you for the pizza.
No, it's great. Yeah. Good. I'm just saying, if
That's
we ever
how
need
it
evidence, hey,
works.
Julian, Eloise paid me.
I see how this
All right.
works.
All right, let's not do weird callbacks now, okay? All right, well, thank you very much, Brayton. That was a very
Don't censor me.
excellent.
That was Yeah, I didn't mean to talk for like half an hour on that, but it's
That's
very
all right.
interesting. And if
Well,
anyone
you did.
look, this kind of stuff you could talk for hours on and never get a quote unquote right answer.
No, that's true.
And there's a very similar one online about the putting a trolley cart away
Oh,
Oh,
yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
question. Just I won't
We're
go
not
through
going
it
to go
now.
into that
No,
because
but look it up. Look it up. It's really good, and it does make you think. But
I
if
will go
you,
into that. Put your damn card away. You're a monster if you don't.
there we go.
Julian used to be a trolley boy,
So
everyone.
did I. So did I. I got so much reading
You
done at that
think it's an
job.
empty space, and it's not because someone's dumped their trolley there.
Yeah,
God,
that's
that
true.
is
Respect anyway
so.
if you don't put it away.
That is quite frustrating,
At
I will
least if
admit.
you're driving with someone else, you can be like, "Hey, can you just run out and put that away? I'll park." If you're by yourself, you're like, "I'm not
I
getting out of
could
the
still
car."
do it, but like I said, I'm very lazy
Mm.
and I don't want to.
And the trouble is, as soon as there's one cart there, it gives permission for every other lazy person to put their cart there because they're like,
Correct.
"Oh, there's
Now we've
one
gone
there
into
already."
this and I'm angry.
All right, let's bring it back now. Okay, thank you
Yes,
very much, Brayton, for posing the thought
but if
experiment.
if anyone out there has their own thoughts about this, I'd love to hear them. Please email us in.
Yes, please do. Email us in at nothelpfulpod@gmail.com
That's it.
for any
Yay!
thoughts of opinions. Yay.
It's like
I'm
the
so
third
glad
or
I've
fourth week in a row you got it
I
right.
know. It's great.
Yay!
Yay. All right, let's get into the meat of this particular episode. And I'm going to throw to Julian because you're going to take over for now with what we're talking about.
I am going to take over.
Sorry, I
Thank
just
you.
checked.
I
We're out of
thought,
time. We're going to have to wrap it
excellent.
up there.
You have saved me because I have done no research into this, even though I said I would.
Brayton, how long were
I'll
you
see you
waiting
guys
to
in a
say
fortnight.
Since
How
episode 1.
I'm like he definitely had that joke planned, everyone.
I've got a post-it note here saying when Julian tries to introduce a topic, interrupt.
All right.
Sorry,
To be
Julian,
Julian.
go
fair,
ahead.
at least Brayton gave me a chance to talk.
Oh, let's not talk about that. I'm still embarrassed about that.
Good.
I'm handing the mic over to you,
I'm going to
Julian.
mute myself. Julian, go.
So, because we're in October, I thought that we could start talking about horror fiction.
Ooh, the spooky season.
Yeah. We talk a lot about horror films, and Brayton and I both really love our horror films, although I think we're fans of different styles of horror, which is great because it can give us some really good discussions. But we often forget that horror began as, well, spoken tales first and then became written tales as well. And they're still quite prolific in the world today. I mean, one of the most prolific authors of our time writes predominantly horror fiction. Of course, I'm talking about Stephen King. As you guys all know, he is my favorite author. And we
You've
are going to
mentioned
do
it
a
once
show
or
dedicated
twice.
to him later. But I thought this week we could talk about horror fiction in general and sort of, I guess, where it's come from, where it is today, and what you guys would consider horror yourselves. What do you consider scary? What does it have to contain to scare you? And what is bad horror, I suppose. Brayton, we kind of went into that a little bit on our Blood and Honey episode where we talked about horror that's really not, that good. So I thought we'd spend just a bit of time just to kick off the spooky season of October.
Yep. I will still say the second Winnie the Pooh. I will still say the second Winnie the Pooh horror film was good.
Legitimately a decent film.
Absolutely. And I would, at some point, Julian, I would love to have a good discussion with you about In a Violent Nature. So that is that's a very interesting take on the slasher flick.
If you haven't seen it, guys, it's on Shudder. In a Violent Nature, it does something a little different, going from the killer's point of view for the entirety of the film.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Biggest complaints I've had is that it is very, very slow.
It is. It isn't. It is a slow burn. There are a lot of long sequences of just the killer walking through, admittedly, very beautiful forest. But I think that there was quite a few good creative kills in there.
The wood chopper one for
The thing that
example.
unsettled me
The
most
the
about that
fish hook
whole
one.
yes, the thing that unsettled me most about the wood chop one is the fact that there's no music throughout the whole film.
Yeah,
So
none.
it's
No
just the
soundtrack.
sounds of the machine. And yeah, we'll talk about
Yep.
it later.
You know,
We'll
it's
dedicate
funny
one
that
to
you
that. Yeah.
mentioned
Yeah,
that actually, because one of the first things that I was thinking about when you posed this question for us to figure out what we're going to talk about tonight was that I think horror needs to have suspense. And I think if you're going to put it from the point of view of the killer, where do you have the suspense then? Because it's not like the killer is perhaps going to have someone come out at them. I mean, possibly you could have something like that, but I feel like maybe that particular movie might be lacking in suspense because you already know where the killer is. So there's no real surprises coming in. Does that make sense?
it
No,
does
it's
make
not the
sense. Yeah,
surprise, I think. It makes sense, but the film itself, I don't think relies on the element of surprise when they pop out of somewhere and kill someone. It's more about that slow creeping dread of you.
mm,
This thing is
Mm,
unstoppable. They're
yeah.
yes,
just like what people hated was the continual walking through the forest. But on the flip side of that, there's this idea that this entity will stop at nothing. It is
mm,
walking through the forest to find you to kill you, and it will do that unless you can find a way to stop it.
yeah,
And we don't know if they can because we don't see what they're trying to do to stop it.
yeah.
Okay, fair enough.
Hmm.
So are we talking about in terms of what makes a really good horror book though?
Well,
Because obviously a
actually,
book medium is
here's
different from a
well,
movie
I think
medium.
Eloise brought up a good point there that I just thought of that in a movie it's really easy to build that suspense
Mm,
and maintain
Hmm.
it, but in a book, and Julian, I think you've read a lot more horror books than I have.
yep.
But in a book, is it harder to maintain and build that suspense because of outside influences? Like if you're reading a book, there could be things going on around you, kids running around, whatever like that. Like, is it harder to build that suspense in a novel form than it would be in a film because of just the nature of reading?
I would say not necessarily. This day and age, you can be watching a horror movie and half your eye is on your phone at the same time, scrolling Reddit or Instagram. We've still got those outside influences that are coming. I guess the only difference is it's much easier to do a jump scare in a film than it is to do a jump scare in a book.
Mm.
Having said that, Dean Koontz has a brilliant
I just
piece
thought
of
of that
writing, and
one.
I think if Richie is listening, he'll remember where he's talking about this character, Odd Thomas, is trying to track someone through the dark, and he's in this dark sort of cave or whatever it was. And he talks about how he couldn't sense anything and he's just going forward in the dark, feeling his way. And that's when the hand reached out and touched him on the face. And that's the end of the
Yeah.
chapter. And you're like, no, come on.
Yeah.
Um,
Yes, that was very good.
so I think you can still build that suspense. You can still build to a jump scare. Stephen King does it brilliantly in The Shining as well.
Mm.
Um, which if you haven't read that, it's actually a very short novel, short for Stephen King. And so there's a lot of horror that takes place very quickly. So you can still, I think, build to that suspense and even incorporate certain jump scares like that. It's just a different feel to it, I suppose. It relies less on you jumping out of your skin and more on your mind going, no, come on, what? Than anything else.
So is it more like, because I think in a horror film, it's this whole thing, you have that ebb and flow where you build up the tension and then
Mm,
there is the jump scare which releases the tension. So in a
mm.
book, it's like the end of that chapter is almost like when the chapter ends, that's the climax of just before the jump scare, essentially
Mm.
the equivalent
Well,
of,
that's where
would
your
you
jump
say?
scare will tend to happen is that last few lines of that chapter. And then the tension breaks as you go on to the next page and you read how they overcome that. Like there's a particular scene in The Shining where there's these hedge creatures that are slowly, and this is a brilliant lesson in how to build suspense, I think, in a novel where the main character, Jack, is out trying to clean some snow off some of the play equipment. And he's doing something and he hears a thump and he turns around and all of a sudden the hedge creatures are covered in snow. He just kind of shakes it off because maybe it's melting. And then he turns around and gets back to his work. And then he looks back and he's like, have they moved? And then he just kind of passes it off or something. And he turns around and does his work again. He looks back and the lion's definitely moved now. And the whole chapter goes on and on and on like this until he's running full pelt back towards the hotel with these hedge creatures after him. And then he falls over and something reaches down and grabs him by the back. And that's where the chapter ends. But then, of course, you turn the page and you realize it's his wife that's tapping him on the back going, are you okay? And the hedge creatures are back where they are and they're covered in snow again. And so you've got that build to that jump scare, him falling over, something grabs him, jump scare, turn the page, tension broken through it being his wife, and then we move on again.
It's funny that's actually quite really reminiscent of the Doctor Who episode Blink, obviously with the weeping angels, where you turn away and then you look back at them and then they're suddenly closer again, and then you get that sound effect of the music's kind of like going zing kind of sound. And it's interesting how you can have all of those types of sound effects to sort of build tension as well, but that's not something that you can have in a book. So I think that's really interesting that that type of very similar structure in The Shining works just as well by the sounds of it. And I think that's a testament, to how good Stephen King is as a writer.
He's very good at creating atmosphere. He took a lot of influence, though, from writers who built their whole careers around creating atmosphere. H.P. Lovecraft, for example, who was another great horror writer of his time. Edgar Allan Poe was another great horror writer who he's taken inspiration from. So, being able to create that atmosphere, I think, gives you the ability to almost allow your audience to see it and maybe even feel the music or whatever in their own minds as they read it.
At the same time, horror is, we've talked about it many times before, horror is a very subjective thing.
Absolutely.
What scares...
Absolutely.
Like, I've watched a lot of horror movies, and I'm to a point now that very few get to me anymore. But one that really did was Skinamarink, which Julian tried to watch, and I don't think you finished it.
I found it deathly boring.
Yeah, it's funny, actually,
I found exactly the opposite.
I was listening to Last Podcast on the Left, and both Ed and Henry were talking about Skinamarink, and both of them hated it as well because they said it was just utterly boring, and they just didn't.
I don't know. There was something about it that just I found so unsettling, and just it terrified me. And I hadn't been that terrified since I first watched like the Blair Witch Project back when it first came out, and that, especially the ending, terrified me.
Was the Blair Witch because of I've never actually seen the Blair Witch Project.
Oh, you should watch it.
And it was because I grew up at a time where I believed the story that it was it's found footage and these people are dead. And I'm like, why is no one doing anything? So that campaign worked. Do you think the Blair Witch is scary at the time because it came out before the modern internet that we have nowadays, where you couldn't just look up and figure out, oh yeah, actually this is all just make-believe, but that it was played to people with the idea that it was real. So do you think that's why that particular film did so well in terms of scaring people, was because so many people literally thought there's a fucking witch out there murdering people in the middle of the forest?
Absolutely. And I think that is why true crime has seen such a huge popularity spike. Because
why now? Why true crime?
Why now? But I think what people have done in real life is a million times scarier than what anyone in Hollywood could think of. And I think you're right. The idea of this really happened is scarier than some ghost popping in and boo.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned the real life thing as well, because the other thought that I had as well in terms of what a horror story needs is things that are, for example, mundane or normal that have somehow been
Mm.
twisted. So, for example, the VHS in The Ring is, or this simple thing. It's a short film that you watch, and then, oh no, you're going to be dead in 7 days. Like a concept or an
Mm.
idea that scares you to your core, or I don't know, a spooky lamp. Ah, ah. It's haunted. No. But like the idea of something that is safe and mundane and an everyday thing that somehow becomes um taken over. So like, a house that's haunted. Everyone
Yeah.
has a house.
There.
Yeah.
There. I don't know where I'm going with that. What are your thoughts?
No, I think you're right. I think simple is better. And that's why, like, I'm one of the few people I think, or maybe not the few people, but I actually think if we're looking at just films, the Conjuring series, I think the first two are both very good films, but I found the first one more effective because it was much simpler. It was like one ghost in a house in a family. And then in the second one, it almost got too big. Like they had the crooked man in there, they had the nun, they had other like they had three or four different things all going at once around, so and it just felt too what's the word, like, Hollywoody.
Mm,
Whereas the first one
Mm.
is just a simple story, and that I found was much more effective. Like they're both good movies. I think the third one is pretty crappy, to be honest. But the first two are still very good. But I found the first one, in terms of a horror story, much more effective because it didn't have that big, like, oh, I'm now fighting the very devil itself at the end and I'm going to defeat all evil. It was just a
yeah.
simpler story.
I think a lot of horror, and this goes like well back to the creation of scary stories, is all about the spoiling of something pure.
Mm,
What is a ghost if not the spoiling of a memory of a family, or the spoiling of a house, a home where, and this is why I think home invasion films can be quite a lot more unsettling than other types of horror films, is that your house where you live, where your family lives, in that pure kind of family unit, love, whatever it might be, being spoiled by a ghost or a demon or whatever, or an outside force coming in and tearing that apart,
I mean,
seems to be the essence of a lot of horror.
look at Freddy Krueger in Nightmare on Elm Street. He attacks you when you feel like you should be safe.
yeah.
When you're in
Mm.
your bed, in your room, in your house, asleep, you feel safe. But having him in
Mm.
your dreams changes all that.
And also, I
Well,
think
yeah.
because, being the victim of a home invasion, like a break and enter, that kind of crime, that's a real thing. And it happens
Mm.
to people. Like I've experienced it twice in my life where someone's broken in to where I've lived and stolen a bunch of stuff. And it is such
I
an
mean, look behind
invasion.
you
It
right
makes you
now.
so, ah! That would be really funny if the curtains suddenly open and
Ah, damn,
something
Yes,
came out.
hilarious.
Ah,
we should have set it up.
really? Yes. But I mean, that invasion of your personal space, it's such an
Mm.
unsettling feeling because you think this is supposed to be my home where we're supposed to be safe, and now it's not because someone's been in here and they've just
Yeah.
defiled it. And so I can totally understand where Julian's coming from in terms of you twist that and then you put monsters into it, and all of a sudden it becomes even more horrifying.
But not even monsters. Look at a film like the original Halloween.
Mm.
Like Michael Myers, until the sequels, like that was, he just randomly targeted these teenagers for no
He
reason
was
other than he
just
wanted to
a
kill them.
He was just a psycho
Yep.
guy with a mask. He
Yep.
wasn't some superpowered devil
Yep.
being that the sequels made him
But
into.
the genius thing is, and I read something somewhere, maybe on Reddit once, but they said that people that have experienced home invasion, because Michael had that white, just blank face, like they were like subtly imprinting the idea of that person invading when they invaded their
Mm,
house. They're like imprinting that onto Michael,
yeah,
making that film scarier.
Yeah,
yeah.
that makes sense. But also look at like the two of the most influential horror, and they were novels well before they were films, and the novels themselves were highly influential. We have The Omen and we have The Exorcist, which both started their lives as books. And if you've never read them, go out and read them. They're actually a brilliant read.
Mm.
Mm.
But they have the thing that's different about them that I think makes them more horrifying is that they have large periods of normality throughout each of the books, and then something shitty happens,
Mm.
and then large periods of normality, and so you think things are slowly becoming okay again, and then oh no, they're worse. But then you think, oh, maybe we can get over it. Oh no, actually now they're even worse. And you look at both of them, and both of them are about the corrupting of a child.
Mm.
Of course, the Omen Damien may or may not be the Antichrist. It's never fully vocalized, I think, in the novel. I can't recall the film. Brayton, have you seen the original film or
Yeah,
the
I think it's
remake?
the original. I think it makes it pretty clear by the end he is. Which,
Hmm.
if we're also taking the first Omen as canon, then yeah, he 100%
Now we
is.
know, yeah. Now we
Yeah,
know, having watched that. By the way, go
yeah,
and watch that film if you haven't. It should
yeah,
not work as a scary movie, but it does.
yeah. That film is unsettling,
Hmm.
and
And like,
yeah,
you
Again,
know
I
how
haven't
it's
watched
going to
any of
end.
those films. I haven't watched any of
we've
those
said
films.
it. We've
We're,
said
we're
it
talking about the
before.
prequel, The First Omen. It's called
No,
The
no, I
First
know.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Omen.
yeah.
and I
But yeah.
think we said it on our. I know we've mentioned it in some other episode somewhere, but yeah, first Omen was surprisingly great.
Yeah, you know how it's going to end, but
Yeah.
still, you hope, and you pray that it won't end that way, even though you know. But
Mm,
that comes back to that whole hopelessness. And of course, The Exorcist is about the devil
mm,
possessing a 12-year-old girl,
yep.
and it's
Mm.
just watching that corruption of this girl.
Yeah. I think a big one too is also the themes of like you said, hopelessness and the idea that we are tiny. And it's something H.P.
Mm.
Lovecraft did a lot. His
Yeah.
idea of horror was just how tiny we are and how big the universe is, and that to him was horrifying. So
And
he had a huge interest in astronomy,
yes.
and yeah, to him, yeah, the insignificance of us as individuals is absolutely terrifying.
He basically wrote about
Mm.
Pluto, like what, months before Pluto was
What did he
discovered? I
call
mean,
it? Yog
bit of a
Sothoth, I think he
yeah, it was
named
a bit of a
Pluto.
coincidence. He basically just he talked about like how a body was found in the far reaches of the solar system, and then literal months later they discovered Pluto, and it was like,
Hmm.
ah, so I think maybe that's actually what helped catapult him a little bit
I'm
more as
fairly
well, because of
certain
that
there are
parallel to
corners,
the story.
yeah, and I'm fairly certain there are corners of the internet that believe H.P. Lovecraft was tapping into some sort of higher consciousness while he was writing.
Or it was just a coincidence.
Or just he was just a very creative person.
He was, yeah. I mean,
Hmm.
H.P. Lovecraft is great, and I wanted to quickly talk about him actually, because
Yeah.
and we have mentioned him before, but
Yep.
obviously he's probably one of the fathers of modern horror writing.
Yep.
But a lot of his books tend to have the same formula where the explanation at the end is horrors
Hmm.
unimaginable. So if they're unimaginable, how can we imagine them? So what are your thoughts about horrors unimaginable?
They're unimaginable. I can't imagine them.
Oh, okay. But does that make it scary
It
or
does. And I've said, where did I say this in another episode? Or maybe I just
say it
said it
again?
to you guys just in casual conversation. Actually, no, I think I said it to Julian. Definitely said to you. But it's the idea that what the human mind can not comprehend, sorry. Well, actually, that's a part of Lovecraft that he writes that literally just seeing one of these elder beings, our brains cannot comprehend them.
Mm,
They are so big, they make no sense. Like when he's describing the architecture of the city in at the Mountains of Madness, he says they have impossible geometry.
yeah. So how
And
are you
like
supposed to represent that?
exactly, like people have tried, illustrators have tried, and like they look weird, but
Yeah.
you literally can't create what he has described. It's
You
literally
know, I
impossible.
I
Mm.
do feel like this is where AI could actually come in handy
Hmm.
because we've all seen like AI created art. And look, don't particularly like it. I don't like the idea of AI co-opting actual artists. But there is one thing that AI art tends to have, which is this weird, uncanny valley
Mm.
kind of feel to it when you're looking at that. And I feel like maybe if you were to ask AI generative art to try and comprehend or like
If we
compose
get a if we
something from the
ask
Mountains of Madness, you might
yeah,
actually have something close to what that would be representative of.
yeah, exactly right. And actually that's a good idea. Might try that.
Come back to me
Yeah.
later
If I
with
come
that.
back
Mm.
insane next fortnight, you'll know what
All right.
happened.
We'll know
Um,
it's all my fault. Okay, great.
but yeah, back to unimaginable things.
Mm,
I often find when I'm watching a horror movie, the most disappointing part, and I think everyone agrees, is the third act when the monster is revealed.
yeah.
Because the monster is never as scary as what you think it will be. So
Like The
when you
Village by M. Night Shyamalan. Shyamalan. Have you
I
I'm
seen
going
The
to
Village?
defend that movie. I
yeah,
loved it.
I was gonna say The Village is underrated.
I I
The,
would
the
have
the monsters were
liked
never meant to be the big
No,
scare, the big
no.
I don't
reveal, I
know. I
guess.
feel
So
like I would have preferred it without the second twist. There's the first twist, and that was at that point I was like, "Oh my God, this is a great film." And then the second twist, I'm like, "I'm really fucking pissed off now." So
There was what's the one? What was I talking to you, Julian? Smile.
Ah, yes, that's a good one.
Very good. I
yes.
loved it right up, and I still think it's a very good movie. But when the monster is revealed at the end and you get a good look at it, it kind of lost something for me. Like that tension of, and we're talking before, like building the tension. When you reveal the
Mm,
monster, the tension is immediately gone because here it
mm,
is. I think a lot more horror films, and that's why I think part of the reason why I think Skinamarink was so effective for me is, and if you don't know about this movie, it is on Shudder, I think. It's essentially two kids
hmm
wake up in a house, their parents are gone, all the doors and windows have vanished, so it's pitch black, and like that's it. And it's about what happens to them, and like some pretty creepy stuff happens. And a lot of that is like we were talking about before, it's the corrupting of the mundane. It's their house, like
Mm.
the layout has changed, just the doors and windows are gone now. Um,
You say creepy. I say lots of boring shots of the tops of walls shot from the bottom of the wall.
it does have some very creative camera angles. I don't know.
That's literally 90% of the film is the top corner of a wall.
I don't for some reason it worked for me,
Well,
but
I've
and I
read a lot
think
about people who
sorry, I was just
people
gonna
who
say
yeah,
yeah, I'm gonna say my point before I forget it. And I think
yeah,
what
yeah,
worked
yep.
for me is that movie was constant tension
Mm,
throughout, and there is some sort of entity or monster or something there, but it is never revealed, and you never get a full explanation of why this happened. And I think in horror films, a lot of the times they fall down is they explain why it happened. And what H.P. Lovecraft does so well is he never explains why, because what is
Mm.
happening is so beyond our comprehension that even if we were explained, we would never understand it anyway.
It's funny how I feel
mm.
like that works, and yet I really hate it when something's not explained, which is why I really hate The Ring, because I really hate the fact that the girl was just evil because she was just evil. I'm like, what do you mean she was just evil? Oh, okay.
She was psychic and got tested on and hated everyone for it.
Uh, eh.
Anyway, sorry, Julian, you were going to say.
With Skinamarink, I've a lot of the reading that I've done on it is people saying that it taps into that feeling of hopelessness as a kid or helplessness as a kid.
Hmm.
It tends to strike more of a chord with kids who felt very helpless or unsafe as children for whatever reason. And that tends to be, I don't know what your childhood was like, Brayton, and I'm not the person you should talk to about it because I'm not very empathetic.
He's
No,
lying, everyone.
but I have heard that, yeah, it does tap into that sense of helplessness that kids tend to feel, particularly if these kids tend to spend their childhood, for whatever reason, feeling a sense of unsafety. And so Skinnamarink tends to tap into that more than anything else.
And I think the exact
Yeah.
opposite opinions we have on this movie is pretty much what I've heard. It's a love it or hate it movie.
Mm.
No one, I don't think
Mm.
anyone has come out of that movie going, it was all right.
Mm.
It's either, yep, that was the scariest thing I've seen in years, or that was utter crap.
Mm. But I think that's what makes things like The Omen and The Exorcist so effective, is that even though there is that kind of final confrontation in The Exorcist, no one really wins that. The priests both die. Because like, well, how the fuck
Spoilers
do you
for
fight
like
the
a
devil?
50-year-old movie.
I've not seen
At
it.
at the end of The Omen, when the father finally realizes, all right, yes, my kid is the Antichrist and I need to kill him. Instead, the police think he's about to murder his child and he's the one who gets killed by the police. There's no win there.
No.
Even though the monster is revealed fairly early on in The Exorcist, I mean, it becomes apparent to everyone outside of the story that this girl is possessed. So the monster's revealed pretty early on. It's that sense of hopelessness and dread of, you can't fight the devil. The devil's
Yeah.
always going to win.
Yep.
We're just humans. And I think that goes right back to when we look at some of the earlier horror stories, like Frankenstein, considered one of the earliest horror novels that we have. It's a person trying to fight death. That's what that novel is all about. And in trying to fight death, they create death. And how the fuck do you beat death? You can't. It's always there and it always wins. And so when the monster becomes, I guess, self-aware, it brings death to everyone around Frankenstein because he tried to control it.
It's such a sad story, Frankenstein.
It's a very sad story. And I would argue it's probably more science fiction than horror, but
yeah, I was about to say,
it
I
is
don't
the
think
start of that romantic gothic style.
Yeah, there was a meme I saw the other day that had like the thick book and the thin book template. And it was like Frankenstein, thick book, and the thin book is Frankenstein if he was a good father.
Basically, yeah.
Oh dear.
Or Frankenstein if he just accepted that his mother died.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Speaking of monsters, the last point I wanted to sort of point out as well is, do horror stories require monsters to be scary?
Define monster.
Clive Barker is a great example of monsters making things scary.
Sorry, what was that?
Clive Barker. It's a great example of monsters making stories scary.
Okay. Can you elaborate? I've not heard of that.
So he wrote the books that Hellraiser is based on, and Candyman is based on.
Right.
And I think H.P. Lovecraft was much the same.
Yeah. Yeah, I was going to say, Eloise, define what you mean by monster. Do you mean supernatural monster?
Yeah, that's what I was just thinking. Okay, so
we could take a movie like Jaws. Jaws has a monster, but it's a shark.
It's just a shark. It's just misunderstood.
Creature feature.
Stay out of the water.
It's not that hard. It's not that hard, people. The shark was the good guy in that movie. The humans were the bad guys.
Yeah, they were all loud and they were splashing around in his home.
If
he was hungry, I understand that.
If people walk into my house and started splashing around, I'd be annoyed too.
Okay, so
look, no, I don't think it does, Eloise. If I'm going to answer your question, I'll go back to The Shining because I think it's a brilliant way of looking at it because it contains both monsters but also a human terror. Because yes, the hotel is haunted, and yes, there are creatures, monsters, ghosts, whatever you want to call them, that are slowly terrorizing the family. But the greater terror is in the wife and the son watching their father go slowly more insane as the book progresses, wondering whether or not he's going to finally snap and kill them.
And isn't there an argument?
That's where the greater terror of the novel comes from.
Isn't there an argument to be made, at least, I haven't read the novel, but at least in the movie, that there are actually no ghosts. It's just Jack Nicholson's character going insane.
I thought
there are people who argue the Stanley Kubrick one was about that, but
I don't know about the novel.
He does make it very clear. No, the novel is very clear that Danny's power, the Shining, is actually turning
Yeah.
on the monsters. It's winding them up and giving
But
them
yeah,
power.
I have heard people argue that, at least in the Stanley Kubrick version, that there are no ghosts. It's just
Yeah,
the character going
right up
insane.
until the end, it's arguable that there's no
Mm.
ghost. But then Wendy starts seeing them,
Yeah.
although it's also argued that's a projection of Jack's
But
insanity on
how did
her.
he end up in the picture, Julian? How did he end up in the picture?
He was always there. There was no Jack.
There was no Jack.
It's like
Jack was the friend we made along the way. No.
It's like when people try and
It's full of
argue.
shit. Yeah.
It's like in Pan's Labyrinth, when people try and argue that
Pan's Labyrinth.
Yeah, when people try and argue that there is no magic, it's like, how did she get out of the room?
It is ambiguous. How did she get out of the room?
How did she get out of the room?
How did she get out of the room? Because she made a chalk drawing that was a door. It is very ambiguous, because obviously the stepfather doesn't see Pan at the end when he goes into the labyrinth, but it's like, but is it because he can't see him? Because only children
do you want a definitive answer?
No, I don't want a definitive answer.
Guillermo del Toro gave a definitive answer.
Did he?
Don't
do that.
In the DVD,
take it back.
In the DVD commentary, he gave a definitive answer.
The whole point of that film is that it's supposed to be ambiguous. I don't want to know what the definitive answer is.
I won't tell you.
Good. Don't tell me. Don't tell anyone. Keep it to yourself. Take it to your grave.
In the commentary, when he got to that scene, he gave, if I'm remembering correctly, he gave a definitive answer about whether the magic was real or not.
Now that's a great horror film.
That is a great horror film.
And I'm going to say, because it's got the best monster ever, with the creepy thin man with the eyes in his hands.
The Pale Man.
Pale Man, that's right, played by Douglas Jones, who was also, was also the Pan.
Yeah, the Faun.
The Faun, yes, I should say the Faun.
Pan is not in that movie.
No, that's true.
I think the literal English translation of the Spanish title is The Labyrinth of the Faun.
Oh, okay. Yes.
But Pan's Labyrinth was just the English title.
If you have not seen that film, it is an outstanding film.
Yes.
And like Shape of Water was overblown crap. I'm sorry. Like, I don't understand why that film won Best Oscar. Pan's Labyrinth is far superior.
Pan's Labyrinth is, I think,
Shape of Water, the
best Del Toro film.
Yes. And it's a great horror film. And like I've already established before, it's not that I don't like horror films, it's just that I'm not drawn to really watching them. I don't really have a desire to watch them. I don't have a desire to read horror stories, yet I'm very obsessed with horror podcasts for some bizarre reason. I don't know why.
Yep.
But I have a lot of horror podcasts that I listen to.
Horror is an odd genre, because even the worst media in horror can still find an audience that loves it.
Mm.
And I don't know any other, maybe science fiction, but there's very few people out there that will defend like a terrible romantic comedy or something.
True.
Or maybe I'm just in the wrong crowds.
Fear is a very primal feeling. We have very few primal feelings. Fear is one of them, I think. I think love is another one. Hatred is another one. They're very pure emotions, pure feelings. And so when we feel them, I don't want to say we like it, because people don't like being scared, but there's a sense that we get when we're afraid of actually feeling truly alive. It's the same when you fall in love with someone for the first time. It's the same when you really, really hate someone. I'm not sure about you have a strong dislike of a person. When you physically hate a person as well, it's such strong, pure emotion. And so I think horror appeals to that part of us. And what you find scary, Brayton, you love your found footage. I don't particularly. It gives me a headache. Eloise, you don't enjoy scary movies, but you love the horror podcasting, you know. It has something for everyone because it connects to our deeper basic instincts, and it does give us a feeling of being alive for those 2 hours, or when we're reading the book or when we're listening to the podcast. And I think that's why horror is so continual. Even now, we're still making great horror films. We're still producing great horror books, horror podcasts. They're still going very strong.
Before we wrap up the conversation, what do you think are like the worst horror tropes that we keep seeing that ruins a
Mm,
horror film or a horror, like a horror story, horror book? Well, I've stumped you a bit.
mm. I think I
It's
th
a hard one to say because what
yeah,
I say, someone else is going to disagree with. I
yeah.
think.
I
Yeah,
think
that's fair.
I said mine before when it can be done well, but when the monster's revealed and it's just disappointing.
Mm.
Like I would rather them keep it in the shadows or at least reveal the monster early
Yeah,
on. Like in Halloween, like Michael's seen pretty early in the film. So you know who
yeah, he's the
he is.
first character you meet, really.
Yeah. So you know exactly who he is, what he looks like. It's more a matter of when is he going to appear. Um,
Hmm. Yeah, I think it's the exposition that I dislike a lot. Um, when you spend half of the second act going through all the different reasonings as to why this is happening and what has to happen to save everyone or whatever it might be, when you go right into all those details, that can take a lot away, I think, from a horror film as well. Um, when they're doing their research or whatever it might be. I watched a movie called Truth or Dare recently, and it was a good movie. It was kind of like Smile a little bit. Um, but what really kind of like the ending itself, I really like the ending. It's a really good, it's a very bleak ending, actually. So, Brayton, you might actually enjoy that.
yeah.
But that research period in the middle that takes up about 30 or 40 minutes of the film where everything kind of stops so they can do that.
Yeah.
And it doesn't add to the drama, it doesn't add to the intensity of the film. It just literally stops so they can research it and
Yeah.
then it starts up again.
There is a really good example just popped into my head. There's a movie called As Above, So Below, which is a found footage movie set in the catacombs of Paris.
Ooh,
Mm.
And
okay.
it
Sounds
essentially,
like a good premise.
yeah, essentially it turns out that the catacombs is a portal down to hell.
Oh, that's boring.
No, it is legitimately it is a found footage movie. It is legitimately creepy and I think very underrated. The main character from Superstore's in it. What's his name?
Oh,
Yeah,
I can't think of his name, but I know who you
but
mean.
I can't remember his
Ben
name.
someone.
Yeah, he's in it.
Hmm.
But very creepy, especially towards the end, because there is actually you can trace their journey through the nine circles of hell throughout the movie.
Hmm.
Ah, okay. Well, I suppose if it had that kind of clever
Um,
twist to it.
but the trope you just said about the research is it's like there's this 5 minute section at the end where they come across a wall with just writing and the main character knows how to read it
Oh,
and through that they work out how to escape.
they
Hmm.
And
escape. Oh, that's boring.
the journey is still worth it. They work out how they can escape, and it's like, well, I would have preferred if they just had accidentally stumbled across the exit somehow, like they just got to the end almost.
Funnily
And
enough,
yeah,
there's actually an episode of the Magnus Archives, which is a sequel to the sorry, no, not Magnus Archives. That's the original podcast. So there's a podcast called the Magnus Archives, horror podcast. Brayton, you put me onto it.
I
Um,
did. That's two podcasts I put you on. That and Night Vale.
yes,
Which
which
night?
is
Welcome to Night Vale. Very silly, but also has a lot of great horror elements to it.
yes, horror but funny.
Yeah, funny horror, which is
Whereas
absolutely a genre.
oh yeah, no, it's
Hmm.
great. So the Magnus Archives, very creepy horror podcast, actually one of my favorites. The original series has 5 seasons. It's excellent. All about fears, essentially, which is actually kind of a spoiler to sort of say it's about fears because you can't that kind of gets revealed later on, but it's not too big a deal. The Magnus Protocol is the sequel at the moment. So it's currently just finished off its first season and there's 2 more to go. It's going to be planned for 3 seasons. And funnily enough, they did actually have an episode where it was a couple who go to Paris. They think they're going to like some underground, like catacomb type thing, but then it turns out to be something completely different. And it turns out it like had to do with some kind of portal. And then there's a sacrifice and someone dies, but then the other person gets out, and then from the point of view of the authorities, it was like dumb British tourists get themselves trapped in a storm drain and one of them dies. But it's like, well, that's not what actually happened. And I think that's a really interesting concept of the idea of something that is, again, mundane, where you think you know where you are, turns out to be something completely different. But then from the point of view of everyone else, it's still mundane. So there's that idea that were you crazy? Like there's the psychological thing there as well. Like, are you crazy? Were you going insane? Have you created something in your own mind to explain away the horrible tragedy that happened to you? That kind of thing. So I do recommend the Magnus Archives and the Magnus Protocol. And you do need to listen to the Magnus Archives first before you listen to Magnus Protocol, or nothing will make sense. Although, admittedly, nothing is making sense right now with Protocol. I have a lot of questions. If you listen to it as well and you know the answers to my questions, please write in and let me know. I have no idea.
Even if you're not listening to it, please write in with your answers anyway.
Yeah.
You might just stumble across it.
Yes, tell me, guess the answers and let me know, everyone.
Shirley Jackson's The Haunting of Hill House is a great example of how to use exposition to build the tension. So instead of having that, scene at the end or whatever it might be, that just kind of info dumps the history of the house and what makes it so scary. She actually now I myself, I didn't think the novel lived up to its reputation, but it does have its reputation for a reason. She pieces out bits and pieces of the house's history as the story goes along and uses that to build the tension and then launch into some kind of a jump scare as well. And some things are never explained either. Much like the series, if you've watched the series, there are some ghosts that are like, where do they even come from? Why?
Highly recommend that series.
Yes. That first season was awesome.
And
very,
the fact
very good.
I didn't find out there were hidden ghosts in it until I finished the series.
And then you
went
back and you went back
and went, oh, that's so cool.
Now that is scary.
The best one that still gets me was the guy working on the clock.
Yes.
Yes.
He's right there.
And because he's right there and the dad points it out, I never brought someone in to do that. Yeah. And you're all like, oh my God, no way.
The trouble with doing that is when Bly Manor came out, everyone on the internet was trying to find the hidden ghosts.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah.
And they
got
were
distracted
there.
by going, where's the hidden ghosts?
Yeah, they did have some hidden ghosts, but it was not nearly as prevalent as in Haunting of Hill House. I should rewatch that. That's such a good show.
Was the person in the well as good a twist as the bent neck woman though?
No, that bent neck woman.
I don't think so.
Jaw on the floor when that was revealed.
Yeah,
that was heartbreaking twist when you think about it.
Yep.
And that show is still responsible for the best damn jump scare I've ever witnessed.
I was literally just about to say
which one was that?
The best jump scare in the car.
The one in the car.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I think the creepiest moment for me was with the floating man with the cane.
When he's under the bed.
Yeah, and he just floats in slowly.
Oh.
And you expect it to cut away, and it never does.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think the moment for me is when he first sees him outside the room, and you don't see his feet, and then comes towards the door. Like, oh no, don't do this to me.
Yes, that's definitely a show that's good at suspense.
We were talking earlier about how to build tension. I think there's a
Mike
magic
Flanagan is a master of it.
There's a magic thing people talk about, and it's horror and comedy actually have a lot to do with each other. But it's that talent to build tension and know when to break it.
Yes.
And it's the same with comedy. Sometimes you have to know when to end a joke, but you also have to know when to push that joke through the uncomfortable moment, and then it becomes funny again. And
like Jimmy Carr.
Yeah.
Yes.
And the thing with, we should probably wrap it up. So this has been a great conversation. I think we're going to talk more next time about horror too.
We are.
because
I
we are
think
still
we're
in spooky season.
spooky season.
But I will end on
So
this story.
deep dive into Stephen King. I'm looking forward to it.
Yep,
Yes.
Julian
Finally.
spearheading this. But I'll end on this story that when I was at uni in an acting class, because we all did theatre degrees, the teacher told a great story about building tension. And he said he was in a play once where he was playing the adult son of a mother, and I don't know the context, but at some point he had to kill his mother, and he did it while she was asleep in an armchair. He would come behind her with a pillow, put the pillow around her face, and she would struggle a little bit, and eventually she would stop struggling and she would die. He said everything had been fine in the show then, but one night he held the pillow just a little bit too long.
Oh,
And
whoops.
what? No, 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 no. The woman was fine.
Oh,
It's not,
okay.
not that. But he said the thing is, he held it for maybe 5, 10 seconds longer than he normally did, and just in that time, the tension, someone in the audience started laughing because the tension got so
Yes.
much, and that triggered a wave of giggles and laughter and chuckles through the audience. And
Okay.
he said he didn't know how to handle it, so he kind of took the pillow off, walked to the back of the stage, and just stood there for like a few seconds, centered himself, and went on with the play. But the point he was making is when you are doing theater and with horror especially, you have to know when to build that tension and when to break it.
Yeah.
Because if you hold
Mm.
it too long and you're not like in that scene as a perfect example, that is perfect of how to hold the tension. But if you can't do that, then it starts to become ridiculous
Yes.
and it loses all effect.
And also, laughing doesn't necessarily mean someone has found something funny, but it
No.
can actually be a physical reaction to something that they're uncomfortable with, like feeling threatened. It has literally happened to me once where I was having a very terrible argument with someone, and they were actually getting quite violent, and I didn't know what else to do except start laughing
Mm.
because I had so much tension inside of me that that's how it came out. And unfortunately it escalated things. Everything's fine. We're fine. I'm fine.
Yep.
It
Good.
was fine. Don't freak out anyone. But I remember being very upset and concerned at the time
Mm.
about that. And
But yeah, it's an
yeah.
involuntary thing. It is a way to break tension. So he was,
Mm,
as an actor, was doing his job very well.
yes.
But he said in the moment he didn't know how to react because
Yeah.
that had never happened before. He said it was
Because
interesting.
how
It
do
was
you
literally
react
just
to that?
five or 10 seconds too long, and the tension broke.
Was the play a comedy? I'm assuming it
I
wasn't
don't
a
I don't
comedy.
think so. I think it was a drama.
Okay. Yeah. So not appropriate
No,
really to make the
no.
audience
But
laugh
it's
after
just
you've
I don't
murdered
know.
someone.
That story has always stuck with me for some reason.
Hmm.
Anyway,
All right. Well, I think that's the end of the episode then. So thank you very much, Julian, for bringing that topic to the table. That was really interesting. Really enjoyed that. He's just gone silent. He's like, we've placed a pillow over his face, and Julian's gone now. All right, to get in touch with us, you can do so by sending us an email to our email address, as I've mentioned before, we're not helpfulpod at gmail.com. You can like, follow, and subscribe to us on Instagram and Facebook, and all of the platforms that you listen to your podcasts on. Don't forget to give
yep.
us a little review. 5 stars, thanks. Yeah, give us 5 stars. Oh, 5 stars. Oh, yeah, I love the show. Oh, it's 5 stars. Oh, yeah. Oh, I'll give it 5 stars. Oh, stop, guys, stop. Okay, we just, calm down. We too much adoration.
When did we bring in a live studio audience? I don't remember
I don't.
that.
Oh, they've been behind the curtain the whole time.
Ah,
All right.
And send us your endorsements. We will endorse whatever you ask
mm.
if the price is right. And that
Shudder.
price is any form of money.
If Shudder wants to sponsor this episode, I will praise that.
Yep.
It's a legitimately good platform. I actually really like Shudder.
All
Tubi
right.
as well. And it's free. And we'll do ad sponsorship for you, Tubi.
Yeah.
All right. We will see you next time where we will be discussing Stephen King. So look forward to that. And until
Yay.
next time, bye for now, everyone.
Bye bye.
Bye.